The son arrived at the funeral to mock his parents, unaware of what the lawyer brought in that envelope. The black Mercedes pulled into the gravel parking lot of St. Mary's Church at exactly 9:47 on a Tuesday morning in late October. Marcus Chen stepped out, adjusted his Tom Ford suit jacket, and looked at the small brick building with barely concealed disgust. This was where his parents' funeral was being held, not a grand cathedral. Not even a respectable modern church with comfortable seating and decent acoustics. But this cramped, outdated relic in a town that time forgot. A building that probably hadn't been updated since the 1970s, with its faded red brick and wooden doors that needed a fresh coat of paint. Marcus checked his Rolex. He had exactly 2 hours before his flight back to San Francisco. 2 hours to sit through this ceremony, hear whatever the lawyer had to say about the will, and then leave this town for the last time. Forever. He locked the Mercedes with a chirp that sounded too expensive, too modern for this parking lot full of decade-old Toyotas and pickup trucks with rusted fenders. A few people were making their way into the church, working-class people in their Sunday best, clothes that were clean and pressed, but clearly not expensive. Women in dresses from department stores, men in suits that didn't quite fit right. His people, or they used to be. Marcus straightened his tie, silk, Italian, cost more than most of these people made in a week, and walked toward the church entrance. He didn't hurry. Didn't feel the need to rush. It wasn't like they could start without him. He was family, the eldest son, even if he hadn't spoken to his parents in 7 years. The last time had been a phone call. His mother asking if he would come home for Christmas. His father in the background, too proud to get on the phone himself, but clearly hoping Marcus would say yes. Marcus had been in Cabo, vacation with his wife and their friends from the firm. Tech executives and their trophy wives, champagne and chartered yachts, and conversations about stock options and real estate portfolios. "I'm busy, Mom," he had said, not even looking up from the infinity pool where he was lounging. Maybe next year. He had said maybe next year for 7 years running, and now there would be no next year. His parents were dead. A car accident 3 days ago on Highway 101, a drunk driver crossing the center line, and here he was, walking into their funeral like he was attending a tedious business meeting. The inside of the church was worse than the outside. Old wooden pews, thin carpet that was probably original to the building, fluorescent lights that hummed slightly, a small altar with a simple wooden cross, and at the front, 2 closed caskets. Plain, probably the cheapest ones the funeral home offered. Marcus felt his lip curl. Even in death, his parents couldn't manage to do anything with class. About 50 people were scattered throughout the pews. Marcus recognized some of them. His father's former co-workers from the factory, his mother's friends from the grocery store where she had worked as a cashier, neighbors from the old neighborhood. People he had spent his entire adult life trying to forget existed. And there, in the front pew, his siblings, all 3 of them. Rebecca, 38, 2 years younger than Marcus. She worked as a nurse at the county hospital, still lived in town, still wore clothes from Target and drove a minivan with car seats in the back. David, 35, high school English teacher, married with 3 kids, lived in a modest house 5 minutes from where they grew up. And Sarah, the baby at 32. She ran a small bakery downtown, never married, still lived in their parents' old house, taking care of them in their final years. All of them turned when Marcus walked down the aisle. Rebecca's face went carefully neutral. David's jaw tightened. Sarah's eyes filled with something that might have been tears or might have been anger. Marcus slid into the pew behind them. Didn't hug anyone, didn't say anything. Just sat down and checked his phone. Already emails from the office. A deal closing tomorrow. He needed to be back for it. "You came," Sarah said without turning around. Her voice was flat, empty. Of course I came. They were my parents. Were they? This from Rebecca. She did turn around then, looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. I wasn't sure you remembered that. Don't start, Rebecca. Start what? A conversation. When's the last time you had one of those with Mom and Dad? I've been busy. I have a career. Responsibilities. Not everyone can stay in their hometown working at— Stop! David's voice was quiet but firm. Not here. Not now. Marcus sat back and said nothing. Fine. He could wait. Could sit through this charade of a funeral and then get to the part that mattered. The will. The reading. The division of whatever meager assets his parents had managed to accumulate before they died. It wouldn't be much. His father had worked at the same factory for 35 years before retiring. His mother had been a cashier, a seamstress, a house cleaner, whatever jobs she could find to help make ends meet. They had lived in the same small house his entire childhood. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a yard the size of a postage stamp. Marcus had grown up sharing a room with David, sleeping in bunk beds, wearing hand-me-down clothes, eating store-brand cereal and discount chicken and vegetables from the backyard garden his mother tended obsessively because it saved money. He had hated every second of it. Hated being poor, hated being the kid who couldn't afford the field trips, who got free lunch at school, who wore the same pair of shoes until they literally fell apart. He had promised himself he would get out, and he had. Scholarship to UC Berkeley, degree in computer science, job at a startup that went public, stock options that made him a millionaire before he was 30. Now he was a VP at a major tech company, 6-figure salary, 7-figure net worth, a house in Pacific Heights, a wife who had never known what it was like to worry about money. He had made it, escaped, become someone who mattered. And his parents, they had stayed exactly where they were, working their dead-end jobs, living in their tiny house, being poor. The service began. A pastor Marcus didn't recognize spoke about his parents, about their kindness, their generosity, their devotion to family and community. Marcus barely listened. He was scrolling through his phone, responding to emails, checking stock prices. Around him people were crying. His siblings were crying. Even grown men he recognized from the factory were wiping their eyes. Marcus felt nothing, or told himself he felt nothing, told himself that whatever emotion was trying to push its way up through his chest was just indigestion from the airport coffee. The eulogy went on. The pastor told stories Marcus didn't recognize. About his father volunteering at the community center, about his mother organizing food drives, about the way they always helped their neighbors, even when they barely had enough for themselves. Marcus thought about the last time he had seen them. Not the phone call. The actual last time, 7 years ago, he had been in town for a conference, hadn't even told them he was coming, but Sarah had seen him at a restaurant and called their parents, and they had shown up. His father in his worn work jacket, his mother in a dress she had probably sewn herself. They had stood at his table, awkward and hopeful, while Marcus's colleagues looked on with barely concealed amusement. "We won't interrupt," his mother had said. "We just wanted to see you. It's been so long." Marcus had stood up, shaken his father's hand like he was a stranger, given his mother an awkward one-armed hug. "I'm in the middle of a business dinner." Of course. We understand. Maybe we could have breakfast tomorrow. Before you leave? I'm flying out early. Look, I'm glad you're doing well. I'll call you soon. Okay?" He had never called. They had probably known he wouldn't. The service ended. People filed past the caskets, touched them, said their goodbyes, cried openly. Marcus stayed in his seat until most of them had left. Then he stood up, walked to the front, and looked at the caskets. Plain pine, simple brass handles, probably cost less than one of his suits. He didn't touch them, didn't cry, just stood there for a moment, checking his watch, thinking about his flight. Marcus. He turned. An old man stood behind him, short, balding, wearing a suit that had probably been expensive 20 years ago but was dated now. Marcus recognized him after a moment. Harold Chen, no relation despite the shared last name. The family attorney had handled his parents' affairs for as long as Marcus could remember. "Mr. Chen, good to see you." "Is it?" Harold's expression was neutral. "You haven't been home in 7 years, didn't attend your father's retirement party, didn't visit when your mother had surgery, didn't come for any of the grandchildren's birthdays, but you made it to the funeral. How convenient." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I don't have to explain myself to you." "No, you don't. But you will need to stick around for the reading of the will. That is why you came, isn't it?" "I came to pay my respects." Harold made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cough. "Of course you did. The reading is in 1 hour, at my office. Your siblings know where it is. I assume you can follow them." He walked away before Marcus could respond. 1 hour. Fine. Marcus could spare 1 hour. Then he would get whatever his parents had left him, sign whatever papers needed signing, and leave. Get back to his real life, his important life, the life that mattered. 22 years. Earlier, Marcus Chen was 18 years old, and he had just gotten the letter. The thick envelope from UC Berkeley, the one that meant everything. He tore it open with shaking hands, standing in the front yard of his parents' house, because he couldn't wait even long enough to get inside. "Dear Mr. Chen, we are pleased to inform you." He had gotten in, full scholarship, everything paid for. 4 years at one of the best universities in the country, and it wouldn't cost his parents a single dollar. He ran inside, clutching the letter. "Mom! Dad! I got in! I got the scholarship!" His mother was in the kitchen making dinner. She turned around, saw his face, and burst into tears, happy tears. She pulled him into a hug so tight he could barely breathe. "My smart boy," she kept saying. "My smart, smart boy." His father came in from the garage where he had been fixing something on their car. He saw the letter, saw Marcus's face, saw his wife crying, and he smiled. A big, genuine smile that showed all his teeth and made the corners of his eyes crinkle. "Berkeley," he said. "Berkeley," Marcus confirmed. His father pulled him into a hug. Marcus was already taller than him, but his father was strong from years of factory work. He smelled like motor oil and soap and something indefinably familiar. "I'm proud of you, son, so proud." They had dinner that night. Nothing special, chicken and rice and vegetables from the garden. But his mother set the table with the good plates, the ones they only used on holidays, and his father opened a bottle of beer and let Marcus have one too, even though he wasn't 21 yet. "To Marcus," his father said, raising his bottle. "To college, to the future, to making something of yourself." They clinked bottles. Rebecca and David and Sarah raised their glasses of water. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was happy. Marcus looked around the table, at his family in their small house with their second-hand furniture and their cheap plates, at his parents who worked so hard and had so little to show for it, at his siblings who would probably end up exactly like them, stuck in this town, working these jobs, being poor. And he thought, "I'm getting out. I'm going to be different. I'm going to be someone." He didn't realize then what that would cost, what he would have to give up, who he would have to become. He just knew he was going to Berkeley, and his life was about to change forever. Present-day Harold Chen's law office was above a dry cleaner on Main Street. Marcus followed his siblings up the narrow stairs, his expensive shoes making hollow sounds on the old wood. The office itself was small. 2 rooms. A reception area with a desk that had probably been there since the 1980s. And a conference room, with a table that could fit maybe 8 people comfortably. Marcus was the last to arrive. His siblings were already seated. Rebecca next to David. Sarah at the end. They had left one chair open, Across from Harold, Marcus sat down, pulled out his phone to check the time. 11:07. His flight was at 1:30. He could still make it if this went quickly. Harold opened a folder, pulled out several documents, looked at the four of them over his reading glasses. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "I know this is a difficult time. Your parents were good people. I'm sorry for your loss." Rebecca nodded. David murmured a thank you. Sarah said nothing, just stared at the table. Marcus waited. His leg bounced under the table, impatient, ready to be done with this. "Your parents left very specific instructions for the reading of their will," Harold continued. "They wanted all four of you present, and they wanted me to read a letter first, before we get to the distribution of assets. A letter, of course, some sentimental nonsense about family and love and staying together." Marcus resisted the urge to check his phone again. Harold pulled out an envelope, opened it, began to read in his steady, professional voice. "To our children, if you're hearing this, it means we're gone. We hope it was peaceful. We hope we went together. We hope you're not fighting over this will the way we've seen other families fight. We have some things we need to say, things we never said while we were alive, because we were always waiting for the right time. Waiting for all of you to be together. Waiting for the moment when you might actually listen. That time never came. So we're saying it now." Harold paused, took a sip of water, continued, to Rebecca. "You stayed. When you could have left, when you had opportunities to move away and build a bigger life. You stayed. You stayed close to us. You called every week. You brought the grandchildren to visit. You were there when we needed you. Thank you. We are so proud of you." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. David reached over and took her hand. To David, "You chose a life of service, teaching, helping others, building a future for children who aren't your own. You never made much money, but you made a difference. You were there for us, for family dinners and holidays, and when the car broke down and we needed a ride. Thank you. We are so proud of you." David nodded, his jaw tight, trying not to cry. To Sarah, "You gave up so much to take care of us. Your 20s and 30s spent looking after two old people who were too stubborn to admit they needed help. You moved back home. You put your life on hold. You were there every single day. Thank you. We're so proud of you." Sarah put her head in her hands and sobbed. Rebecca put an arm around her. Marcus sat very still, waiting, knowing what came next. To Marcus, "You left." The words hung in the air, simple, direct, brutal. "You left and you never came back. Oh, you came back physically a few times, for holidays you couldn't avoid, for your grandfather's funeral, for your sister's wedding, but you were never really there. Your body was present, but your heart was somewhere else, somewhere bigger, somewhere better, somewhere that didn't include us." Marcus's hands were clenched in his lap. His face was carefully neutral. He felt his siblings' eyes on him but didn't look up. "We know you were ashamed of us, ashamed of where you came from, ashamed of being poor, ashamed of having parents who worked with their hands instead of their minds, ashamed of the small house and the old car and the clothes that weren't name brands. We saw it in the way you stopped bringing friends home, in the way you changed your accent, in the way you forgot to invite us to your college graduation, in the way you got married and we found out from Rebecca, in the way you had children and we only saw pictures on Christmas cards. You wanted to be someone else, someone who didn't come from here, someone who didn't have our last name and our history and our struggles. And you succeeded. You became that person. But in doing so, you stopped being our son." Marcus's throat was tight. He still didn't look up, didn't want to see his siblings' faces, didn't want to see the judgment in their eyes. "Which brings us to the will," Harold read. "The distribution of our assets. Here it comes," Marcus thought. "The part where they leave him something anyway. where they prove they loved him despite everything, where they give him his share and hope it brings him back to the family. To Rebecca, David, and Sarah, we leave everything, the house, the savings, the investments, the life insurance, all of it, divided equally among the three of you. Marcus's head snapped up. What? Harold continued reading as if he hadn't spoken. To Marcus, we leave nothing. No money, no property, no possessions. You don't need it. You've made that clear. You have your own money, your own life, your own family that doesn't include us. So we leave you with the one thing you've always wanted. Complete freedom from us, from our memory, from any obligation to think about us or miss us or feel guilty. You're free, Marcus, free to be exactly who you wanted to be. Someone who isn't defined by where he came from, or who raised him, or what he grew up with. Congratulations. You won. The letter ended. Harold folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then he looked at Marcus. There is one more thing, Harold said. Another envelope, for you specifically. Your parents wanted me to give it to you after reading the will. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table. Marcus stared at it like it was a snake. What is it? His voice came out rougher than he intended. I don't know. It was sealed. Your father gave it to me 3 years ago with instructions to give it to you at this reading. I suggest you open it. Marcus picked up the envelope. It was heavy. Something substantial inside. He broke the seal and pulled out the contents. Papers. Lots of them. And a letter in his father's handwriting. He read the letter first. Marcus, I'm writing this 3 years before the will is read. Your mother and I are both still alive, still healthy, still working, still living in that small house you hate so much. I want you to know something that might change how you think about us. Or maybe it won't. Maybe you're too far gone for anything to matter. We're not poor. Marcus stopped reading. Read the sentence again. Looked up at Harold, who was watching him with an expression that might have been pity. What does he mean? Keep reading, Harold said quietly. We haven't been poor for 15 years, not since the settlement. You don't know about the settlement. Why would you? You stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped asking about our lives. But I'll tell you now, when I was 53, I was injured at the factory. A machine malfunction. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was bad enough. Bad enough that the company settled, quietly, generously. They didn't want a lawsuit, didn't want the publicity. They paid us $3.2 million. The conference room was completely silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, could hear the traffic from the street below, could hear everything except what his siblings were thinking as they watched him read. $3.2 million, the letter continued. Plus, I got to retire with full benefits, plus the pension I had already earned, plus your mother's social security when she turned 65. We went from being poor to being comfortable, more than comfortable, secure. For the first time in our lives, we could have moved, could have bought a bigger house, could have traveled, could have done all the things people with money do, but we didn't. We stayed in our house, kept our old car, lived the same simple life we had always lived, because that life was enough for us. We didn't need more, but we used the money. Used it well. We paid off the house, put money aside for your siblings' kids' college funds, donated to charities, helped neighbors who were struggling, lived without the fear of one unexpected expense destroying us. And we waited to see if you would come back, if you would call, if you would show any interest in our lives beyond the obligatory Christmas card. We thought maybe if you knew we had money, you would come back, so we dropped hints. In the few conversations we had, we mentioned investments, mentioned being comfortable, mentioned having savings. You never asked about it, never showed any interest, never wanted to know, because you didn't come back for us. You would only have come back for the money. The documents in this envelope are proof. Bank statements from the last 15 years, investment records, property deeds, everything showing what we had and what we did with it. We lived modestly and died with nearly $4 million in assets after 15 years of investments and careful planning. All of it goes to your siblings, not because we love them more, but because they loved us, because they showed up, because they cared about us as people, not as potential inheritance. You're a smart man, Marcus. You graduated from Berkeley. You built a career. You made your own money. You don't need ours. But maybe this will teach you something. Maybe it will show you that the people you looked down on, the people you were ashamed of, were smarter than you thought, were more successful than you realized, were capable of more than you ever gave them credit for. We were poor when you were growing up, that's true. But we stopped being poor the year you graduated from college, the year you stopped coming home. For 15 years we waited for you to care, to call, to visit, to ask about our lives, to be our son instead of a stranger who shared our name. You never did. So this is goodbye, Marcus. This is us letting you go, the way you let us go a long time ago. We love you. We always will. But we can't keep breaking our hearts waiting for you to come back. Be well, be happy, be successful. Just don't be surprised that being successful didn't make you a better person. Dad Marcus set the letter down with shaking hands, looked at the bank statements, the investment records. The numbers swam in front of his eyes. $4 million. His parents had died with $4 million in assets, and he got none of it. He looked up at his siblings. They were watching him with identical expressions, not triumph, not satisfaction, just sadness. Deep, profound sadness. You knew, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. We knew, Rebecca confirmed. They told us about the settlement when it happened, told us what they were planning to do with the money, told us they were waiting to see if you would come back. And you never told me. Why would we? You never asked about them, never cared. You made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with this family. I was busy. Stop. David's voice was sharp. Stop lying. To us. To yourself. You weren't too busy. You were ashamed. You were embarrassed. You thought you were better than us. I never said that. You didn't have to say it. It was in everything you did, every missed call, every forgotten birthday, every holiday you were too busy to attend, every time you acted like we didn't exist unless it was convenient for you. Marcus stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. I built a life. I made something of myself. I'm sorry if that meant I didn't have time to sit around in this dead-end town with people who were content to be nobody. The words came out before he could stop them. Harsh, cruel, true. Sarah stood up too. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. Get out. What? Get out. You got what you came for. You know what's in the will. You know you're getting nothing. So there's no reason for you to stay. Go back to San Francisco. Go back to your important life. Go back to being someone. I have a right to contest this. Contest it. This from Rebecca. Get your lawyers. Fight it in court. Drag this out for years, but you'll lose. Dad made sure the will was ironclad, and even if you won, even if you somehow got your share, what would it change? Would it make Mom and Dad any less dead? Would it make you any less alone? I'm not alone. I have a family. Do you? Sarah's voice cracked. Do you really? Because we're your family. We were your family, your blood, your history, your people, and you threw us away like we were nothing. So don't stand there and tell us about your family. Tell us about the wife who's probably cheating on you because you work 80 hours a week. Tell us about the kids you never see. Tell us about the friends you bought with your money and your status. Tell us about that family. The words hit like physical blows. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, had nothing to say, because Sarah was right. His wife was probably cheating on him. They barely spoke anymore, slept in separate bedrooms, stayed together because divorce was expensive and complicated, and neither of them had the energy to deal with it. His kids, 10 and 7, were raised by nannies. He saw them maybe an hour a day, if that. They called him Marcus, not Dad, treated him like a stranger who paid for things. His friends, what friends? He had colleagues, acquaintances, people he networked with, people who would drop him the second he stopped being useful. He had money, status, success, all the things he thought mattered, and he had nothing that actually did. "Get out," Sarah said again. "We have things to discuss with Harold, family things, and you're not family anymore. You made that choice a long time ago." Marcus looked at Harold. The old lawyer shrugged. "She's right. The will is straightforward. You're not a beneficiary. Your presence isn't required for the rest of this." Marcus gathered the documents, the letter, the bank statements, shoved them back into the envelope. His hands were shaking, his throat was tight, his eyes were burning, but he refused to cry, refused to show weakness in front of these people who had never made anything of themselves, who had stayed in this town, who had been content with less. He walked to the door, stopped, turned back. "I made something of myself," he said. "I got out. I built a life. That's more than any of you can say." David looked at him with something that might have been pity. "You're right, Marcus. You made something of yourself. You made yourself into exactly the kind of person Mom and Dad were terrified you'd become. Congratulations. I hope it was worth it." Marcus left, walked down the stairs, got in his Mercedes, sat in the driver's seat with the envelope in his lap and his hands on the steering wheel, and his whole life crumbling around him. $4 million. His parents had been sitting on $4 million for 15 years, living in their small house, driving their old car, wearing their cheap clothes, and he had assumed they were poor, had been ashamed of them, had cut them out of his life because he thought they were beneath him. And all that time they were testing him, waiting to see if he would come back, if he would care about them as people instead of as an obligation or a burden or an embarrassment. He had failed the test, spectacularly, completely, and now they were gone, and he couldn't take it back, couldn't apologize, couldn't explain, couldn't make it right. He started the car, pulled out of the parking lot, drove toward the highway, toward the airport, toward his flight back to San Francisco. But halfway there, he pulled over, stopped at a rest area off Highway 101, got out of the car, walked to the edge of the parking lot where there was a view of the valley below. This was where the accident had happened, 3 days ago, right here. The drunk driver crossing the center line, the impact, his parents dying together the way they had lived together. Marcus stood there for a long time, holding the envelope, looking at the place where his parents had died. And for the first time in 22 years, since the day he left for Berkeley and promised himself he would become someone different, someone better, someone who mattered, Marcus Chen cried. He cried for his parents, for the relationship he had thrown away, for the years he had wasted being ashamed of people who had loved him unconditionally, for the chances he had missed and would never get back. He cried for himself, for the man he had become, for the success that felt hollow, for the money that meant nothing, for the life he had built that was empty and cold and lonely. He cried until there were no tears left, until he was exhausted, until the sun was starting to set and his flight had long since left without him. Then he got back in his car, and he didn't drive to the airport. He drove back to town, back to the small house on Maple Street where his parents had lived, where his siblings were probably gathering to go through their parents' things, to remember, to grieve together. He didn't know if they would let him in, didn't know if they would forgive him, didn't know if it was even possible to fix what he had broken. But he had to try. Because his father was right. Being successful hadn't made him a better person. It had made him worse, harder, colder, more alone. And maybe it was too late to change that. Maybe he had burned too many bridges, hurt too many people. Maybe there was no coming back from this. But he had to try. 18 years earlier, Marcus was in his junior year at Berkeley when his mother called to tell him his father had been injured at the factory. He was in the middle of studying for midterms, working on a project that was worth 40% of his grade, trying to secure an internship at Google for the summer. "How bad is it?" he asked, barely looking up from his laptop. "Bad enough. His arm got caught in the machine. They had to do surgery. He'll be okay, but he can't work for a while. Maybe never again in the same capacity." "That's terrible, Mom. I'm sorry. Look, I'm in the middle of midterms, and I have this project due, and I'm not asking you to come home, Marcus. I know you're busy. I just wanted you to know, in case anyone asks. In case anyone asks. In case people wonder why you're not here. Why you didn't come home when your father got hurt." There was something in her voice. Not quite accusation, not quite hurt. Something in between. "I'll come home soon," Marcus said. "After midterms, after this project, I promise." "Of course, after. There's always an after with you, isn't there?" She hung up before he could respond. Marcus stared at his phone for a moment, felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. Guilt, maybe, or obligation, or the faint recognition that he was failing at something important. But then his roommate called him to come look at the code they were writing, and the feeling passed. He put the phone down, went back to his project, his important grade-determining, future-defining project. He didn't go home after midterms. There was the internship interview, then the final exam period, then summer session courses, then the internship itself. By the time he came home for Christmas, 6 months after the accident, his father was already walking around with a brace on his arm, already learning to live with limited mobility, already negotiating the settlement with the factory's lawyers. Marcus spent 3 days at home, uncomfortable days. His father was quiet, his mother was too cheerful. His siblings looked at him like he was a stranger. He left on the 27th, said he had to get back to school early, had work to do, had to prepare for the spring semester. No one argued. No one asked him to stay. No one seemed surprised he was leaving. And Marcus told himself he was fine with that, told himself his real life was at Berkeley. His real future was in Silicon Valley. His real family was the network he was building, the connections, the opportunities. This town, this house, these people, they were his past, not his future. He didn't realize until much later that in choosing his future, he was losing his past, and that a person without a past is just a ghost, floating, unanchored, belonging nowhere. Present day. The Mercedes pulled up in front of the small house on Maple Street just as the sun was setting. The porch light was on. Cars were parked in the driveway and along the street. Rebecca's minivan, David's sedan, Sarah's old pickup truck. Other vehicles Marcus didn't recognize. Family friends, probably. Neighbors. People who had actually cared about his parents. Marcus sat in his car for a long time. Engine off. Hands on the steering wheel, looking at the house. It was the same house he had grown up in. Same brown siding, same white trim. Same small porch with the swing his father had built when Marcus was 8. Same everything, but also different. The yard was better maintained than he remembered. New flower beds, a vegetable garden that was bigger and better organized, fresh paint on the trim, new gutters, little improvements that added up. His parents had money. For 15 years they had money, and they had used it to make their lives better in small, practical ways. Not to impress anyone, not to prove anything, just to be comfortable, to not have to worry, to help others. And Marcus had never noticed, never asked, never cared enough to look past his own assumptions. He got out of the car, walked up the driveway. Each step felt heavy. He reached the porch. raised his hand to knock. The door opened before he could. Sarah stood there. She had changed out of her funeral dress into jeans and a t-shirt. Her eyes were still red, but she looked calmer, more composed. They stood looking at each other. Marcus searched for words, found none. "I don't know what I'm doing here," he finally said. I couldn't go back, not yet, not without what? Without trying to explain, to apologize, I don't know, something." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." Marcus walked into the house. It smelled the same. Coffee and something baking and a faint scent of lavender from the soap his mother always used. The living room was full of people. They all turned to look at him. Rebecca and David sat on the couch. Some neighbors Marcus vaguely recognized were in the chairs. A few of his parents' friends from church. Everyone went quiet when they saw him. "Marcus is here," Sarah announced unnecessarily. Rebecca stood up, crossed her arms. "Why?" "I wanted to talk, to explain." "There's nothing to explain. We all understand perfectly. You were ashamed of us. You left. You built a different life. You didn't want us in it. That's clear." "It's not that simple, isn't it?" Marcus looked around the room, at all these people who had been part of his parents' lives, who had shown up for them, who had cared about them, who had treated them like they mattered. "Can we talk?" he asked his siblings. "Just the four of us?" The neighbors and friends took the hint. They made their excuses, filed out. Sarah closed the door behind them. Then the four Chen siblings stood in the living room of their childhood home. The first time they had all been together in 7 years. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. The words felt inadequate, but he didn't know what else to say. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I was ashamed. I'm sorry I missed everything. I'm sorry I failed them, failed you, failed myself." "Sorry doesn't change anything," David said quietly. "Sorry doesn't bring them back. Sorry doesn't give us back the years you wasted. Sorry doesn't make you less of a stranger." "I know. But I don't know what else to say." "Maybe don't say anything," Rebecca suggested. "Maybe just leave. That's what you're good at, right? Leaving?" The words stung, but Marcus absorbed them, deserved them. "I don't want to leave. Not this time. Not without trying to fix this." "Fix what? Us? We're not broken, Marcus. You are, and we can't fix you. Only you can do that." "Then tell me how. Tell me what to do." Sarah laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "That's so typical. You want us to tell you what to do, give you a roadmap, make it easy. But relationships don't work that way. You can't just follow instructions and fix years of neglect and abandonment." "I know I screwed up." "Screwed up?" Rebecca's voice rose. "You didn't screw up, Marcus. You made a choice, a deliberate, conscious choice to cut us out of your life, to pretend we didn't exist, to be embarrassed by your own family. I was young. I was stupid. I thought, what? What did you think? That money would make you happy? That success would fill the hole in your life? That being important was better than being loved?" Marcus had no answer for that, because the truth was yes. He had thought all those things, had believed them completely, had structured his entire adult life around those beliefs, and they had all been lies. "I read Dad's letter," he said finally, "about the settlement, about them having money, about them waiting to see if I would come back." "And?" David asked. "And I failed. I failed the test. I had 15 years to show them I cared about them as people, not as obligations or burdens or sources of embarrassment. And I didn't do it. I never called, never visited, never asked about their lives. I just assumed they were still poor and struggling and that I was better off without them." "You assumed we were all still poor," Sarah said. "Did it ever occur to you that maybe we were doing fine? That maybe you weren't the only successful one in the family? That maybe success means different things to different people?" "I didn't think—" "No, you didn't. You didn't think about us at all. You were too busy being successful, too busy being important, too busy being ashamed." They stood in silence. The house felt smaller than Marcus remembered. Or maybe he just felt bigger, out of place, like he didn't belong here anymore. Maybe he never had. "I want to make this right," he said finally. "I don't know how, but I want to try." "Why?" Rebecca asked. "Why now? Because you feel guilty? Because you realized you're alone? Because you found out they had money and you're trying to angle for some after all?" "No! Because they were my parents, because you're my family, because I've spent 22 years running from where I came from, and I'm tired. I'm so tired of pretending, of being someone I'm not, of building a life that looks good from the outside but feels empty inside. So you want to come back now, after everything, after all these years? You think you can just walk in here and we'll welcome you with open arms and everything will be fine?" "No, I don't think that. I think I burned every bridge I had. I think I destroyed any chance of having a real relationship with any of you. I think I'm probably too late, but I have to try. Because the alternative is going back to San Francisco and living the rest of my life, knowing I had a family and I threw them away. And I can't. I can't do that anymore." The siblings looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. David uncrossed his arms. Sarah's jaw unclenched. "You can't just come back and everything be the way it was," Rebecca said. "We're not those kids anymore. You're not the brother we knew. Too much has happened. Too much time has passed." "I know. And we're angry, we're hurt. We watched Mom and Dad wait for you, watch for your car every holiday, check their phones every time they got a message hoping it was you, break their hearts over and over again. We're not going to just forgive that because you showed up one time with an apology." "I know. But," Sarah said, and Marcus's heart caught on that word, that one small word that meant possibility. "But maybe we can try. Maybe we can start over. Not as the family we were, but as the family we could be, if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to show up, if you're willing to prove you mean it. I'll do whatever it takes. It's going to take time and effort, and you being here, not just physically, but actually here, present, engaged, caring. I can do that. I will do that." David stepped forward. "Mom and Dad left everything to the three of us, but there's a clause in the will. If all three of us agree, we can divide it 4 ways. We can include you if we choose to." Marcus shook his head immediately. "I don't want the money. That's not why I'm here. We know. That's why we're offering. Because you're not asking for it. Because you came back even after you knew you weren't getting anything. Because maybe, just maybe, you finally understand what actually matters. I don't deserve—" "You're right. You don't. But maybe that's the point. Maybe grace isn't about deserving. Maybe it's about giving something anyway, because that's what family does." Marcus felt his eyes burning again. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Rebecca said. "Just stay. For tonight, for the week, for however long it takes to go through their things and settle their affairs. Just be here. That's all we're asking. Can you do that?" Marcus thought about his flight, his wife, his job, his important life back in San Francisco, and he realized none of it mattered. Not really. Not compared to this, to family, to the chance to be part of something real instead of something that just looked good on paper. "Yes," he said. "I can do that. I will do that." "Okay then," Sarah said. She moved toward him hesitantly, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed. Then she hugged him. A real hug. Not the awkward one-armed thing from 7 years ago, but a genuine embrace. Rebecca joined. Then David. The 4 of them standing in the middle of their parents' living room, holding each other, crying together for the first time in 22 years. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It wasn't healing. Not completely. But it was a start. And maybe that was enough. 1 week later, Marcus stood in his parents' bedroom, going through his father's clothes, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. It was slow work. Every item had a memory attached. Every shirt his father had worn to church, every pair of pants he had worn to work, every jacket he had put on for family dinners. Marcus held up a worn flannel shirt, blue and grey plaid, soft from 1,000 washings. He remembered this shirt. His father had worn it constantly, in the garage, in the garden, on weekends. He lifted it to his face, breathed in. It still smelled like his father, motor oil and coffee and Old Spice. Marcus sat down on the bed, still holding the shirt, and cried. Again. He had cried more in the past week than he had in the previous 20 years combined. "You okay?" He looked up. Sarah stood in the doorway holding a box of his mother's things. "Yeah, just this shirt. I remember it. The flannel. Dad loved that thing. Mom tried to throw it out at least a dozen times. Too worn, too stained. But he wouldn't let her. Said it was comfortable." Marcus smiled despite the tears. That sounds like him. Sarah came and sat next to him on the bed. "You know what I remember? I remember you wearing a shirt just like this. When you were in high school, you used to steal Dad's flannels, said they were warmer than your own clothes." Marcus had forgotten that, but now that she said it, he remembered. Coming home from school in the winter, grabbing one of his father's shirts from the closet, wearing it while he did homework, giving it back before his father noticed. "I forgot I used to do that." "You forgot a lot of things, about who you were, where you came from." "I did. I spent so long trying to be someone else that I forgot who I actually was." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sarah said, "Rebecca and David want to have a family meeting tonight to talk about the house, what we're going to do with it. Sell it? Maybe. Or maybe one of us takes it. Or maybe we keep it as a family place. We haven't decided, but we wanted to include you in the discussion." "Really? Really? Your family, Marcus. We're not forgetting that again, even if you did." That night, the 4 siblings sat around the kitchen table where they had eaten 1,000 meals as children, where their parents had sat across from each other every morning drinking coffee, where they had done homework and played board games and argued about chores. "So," Rebecca started, "the house. We need to make a decision." "I think we should keep it," David said immediately. "This is our family home, where we grew up, where Mom and Dad lived for almost 40 years. It feels wrong to sell it." "But none of us live here," Sarah pointed out. "I'm in the apartment downtown. Rebecca, you have your place across town. David, you're in the suburbs. What would we do with it?" "Use it for gatherings, holidays, family reunions. Keep it so the next generation has a place to come back to, so they know where they're from." Marcus listened without speaking. This wasn't his decision to make. He had given up the right to have a say when he left, but then Rebecca turned to him. "What do you think, Marcus?" "Me? I don't think I should." "You should. You're part of this family. You get a vote." Marcus looked around the kitchen. At the table, that was the same one from his childhood. At the cabinets his mother had painted white. At the window over the sink where she used to stand washing dishes and looking out at her garden. "I think," he said slowly, "that David is right. We should keep it, not because we need it, but because it's important to remember where we came from, who raised us, what we're built on." He paused. "I spent 22 years trying to forget this place, trying to pretend I wasn't from here, trying to be someone who didn't grow up in a small house with second-hand furniture and parents who worked dead-end jobs. And it made me miserable. It made me into someone I don't like very much. So keeping the house would be a reminder, for me, for all of us, that where we came from matters, that our parents mattered, that the things we thought were embarrassing were actually the things that made us who we are." Sarah nodded. Then we keep it. All in favor? 4 hands went up. Unanimous, David said. The house stays in the family. They talked for another hour. About logistics, about maintenance, about who would handle the utilities and the taxes and the upkeep. They decided to share the responsibilities, share the costs. Make it truly a family place. Before they left, Sarah pulled out one more envelope. Harold gave this to me. It's from Mum. She wrote it separately from the will. He said to open it after we made the decision about the house. She opened it, read aloud. To my children, if you're reading this, you've decided what to do with the house. I hope you chose to keep it. Not because the house itself is special. It's just a building, walls and a roof and old floors that creak. But because it's a symbol. Of family, of staying, of choosing each other even when it's hard. I know you're hurt, all of you. Marcus because he realizes what he lost. The rest of you because you watched him leave and never come back. But hurt can heal. If you let it. If you choose to. Family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up for each other, forgiving each other, choosing each other again and again, even when it's hard. Marcus, if you're there, if you came back, I want you to know, we forgave you a long time ago. We were hurt, we were disappointed, but we never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping you would find your way home. Rebecca, David, Sarah, give him a chance. He's your brother. He's flawed and human and he made mistakes, but so have all of you. So have we all. And to all 4 of you, take care of each other. Life is short. We learned that the hard way. Don't waste it on grudges and hurt feelings. Don't waste it on pride. Be family. Be there for each other. Be the people we raised you to be. We love you. All of you. Always. Mom. The letter ended. Sarah folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope. No one spoke for a long time. Then Marcus said, I need to make some phone calls to my wife, to my boss, to everyone. About what? Rebecca asked. About coming home. For good. Or at least for now. I need to be here. To figure out who I am when I'm not running from where I came from. What about your job? Your life in San Francisco? What about it? It's not making me happy. It's not making me a better person. Maybe it's time to try something different. Like what? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Together, if you'll have me. His siblings looked at each other, then back at him. We'll have you, David said. We're family. That's what family does. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the garage of his parents' house, his house now, his family's house, and looked at the project he had been working on. He had quit his job in San Francisco. Separated from his wife, she had been relieved, actually, admitted she had been unhappy for years. They were working out custody of the kids. Marcus was trying to rebuild his relationship with them. It was slow work, but he was trying. He had moved back to Riverside, rented an apartment downtown, started a small consulting business, working with local companies on their tech infrastructure. It wasn't glamorous, didn't pay what he used to make, but it was enough, and it let him be present, for his siblings, for his nieces and nephews, for himself. The project in the garage was a woodworking bench. He was building it from scratch, using his father's old tools, learning as he went. It was slow work, frustrating sometimes, but satisfying in a way his tech job had never been. That's looking good. He turned. David stood in the doorway. Thanks. Still have a long way to go, though. Dad would have liked this, you building things, using your hands. Yeah, I think he would have. David came and stood next to him, examining the bench. You know what I was thinking about today? What? That dinner, 22 years ago, when you got into Berkeley, when we all celebrated, when Dad toasted your future. Marcus remembered. What about it? I was thinking that Dad was right. You did make something of yourself, just not in the way you thought you were supposed to, not in the way you thought mattered. What do you mean? You made yourself into someone who could leave, who could succeed, who could build a big career and make a lot of money. And that's not nothing. That took work. That took sacrifice. But along the way, you forgot to make yourself into someone who could stay, who could love, who could be part of a family. And that matters too, maybe more. Marcus set down the sandpaper he had been using. I'm trying to learn that now. How to stay, how to be present, how to be family. I know, and you're doing good. It's not easy. Undoing 22 years of running, but you're doing it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then David said, "Family dinner on Sunday, at Rebecca's. You coming?" "Wouldn't miss it." "Good, because we're not letting you miss things anymore. We're keeping you whether you like it or not." Marcus smiled. "I like it, I really do." After David left, Marcus went back to his project, sanding the wood, smoothing the rough edges, building something with his hands the way his father used to. He thought about the envelope, the letter, the will, the test he had failed so spectacularly, but also about the second chance he had been given, the family who had let him back in, the opportunity to do better, to be better. His parents were gone. He couldn't change that, couldn't apologize to them, couldn't make up for the years he wasted, but he could honor them. By being the son they had hoped he would be, by choosing family over success, by staying instead of running, by building something real instead of something that just looked good from the outside. He picked up his father's old flannel shirt, the one he had kept from the house. Put it on. It smelled like sawdust now instead of motor oil, but it felt right. He was home. Finally. For real. And this time, he was staying. You know what I learned from Marcus's story? That success without connection is just loneliness with a better address. Marcus had everything. Money, status, career, all the things we're told to chase, all the things that are supposed to make us happy. And he had nothing, no family, no real friends, no one who knew him, no one who loved him for who he was, instead of what he could do for them. He spent 22 years building a life that looked perfect from the outside, and inside it was empty. His parents knew that. That's why they tested him, not because they were cruel, but because they wanted to know if he cared about them. If he saw them as people, if he understood that love isn't about what you get, it's about what you give. He failed the test, but he got a second chance, and this time he passed. Now let me ask you something. Is there someone in your life you've been taking for granted? Someone you assume will always be there? Someone you'll call later or visit next year or apologize to eventually? Eventually runs out. Later becomes never. Next year becomes too late. The people who love you won't be here forever, and the things you think don't matter, family dinners and phone calls and showing up, those are the things that matter most. Put their name in the comments. Tell me about someone you need to appreciate more, someone you need to call, someone you need to stop taking for granted. And if this story made you think, if it made you uncomfortable, if it made you realize you're being a Marcus in someone's life, good. That means you can still change. You can still choose differently. Hit that like button if you felt something. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's chasing success at the expense of connection. Someone who's running from where they came from. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories like this. Real stories about real people facing real choices. Stories that make you think about what you're building with your life. Stories that remind you what actually matters. Every week there's a new story waiting. Stories about family, about forgiveness, about second chances, about the difference between looking successful and actually being happy. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And if you're someone's Marcus, if you're the one who left, who stopped calling, who got too busy for family, it's not too late. Not as long as they're still here. Not as long as you're still breathing. Go home. Call them. Show up. Choose them, before eventually becomes never. That's everything. See you next week.